Imagine you show up today and you make a choice that's 1% better versus 1% worse. On any given day, that doesn't mean a whole lot. You don't have much to show for it. What's the difference between eating something healthy for lunch or eating something unhealthy? Well, at the end of the day, your body looks the same in the mirror, the scale hasn't changed. It's only 2 or 5 or 10 years later that you're like, oh, that stuff really does add up, Knowledge, similar example. So somebody who reads for 10 minutes a day, again, reading for 10 minutes does not make you a genius, but the person who always goes to bed a little bit smarter than they were when they woke up, the person who always carves out a little bit of time each day to learn something new, over a 10 or 20 or 30 year period, it's a really meaningful difference in wisdom and insight. And so we see this same pattern again and again throughout life, which is what starts out small and is relatively insignificant, pretty easy to dismiss on a daily basis, it compounds, it multiplies, it transforms over time. And so for all of those reasons, I like to refer to habits as the compound interest of self-improvement. The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them across time. Time will magnify whatever you feed it. So if you have good habits, time becomes your ally. And every day that goes by, you put yourself in a stronger position. If you have bad habits, time becomes your enemy. And every day that goes by, you kind of dig the hole a little bit deeper. And this is really the first big idea that I want to get across today, which is an emphasis on trajectory rather than position. There's so much discussion about position in life. What's the number on the scale? How much money's in the bank account? What's the current stock price? What are the quarterly earnings? We have all these ways of measuring and analyzing our current life. And then if the number isn't what we hope it should be or what we want it to be, we start to feel guilty or judge ourselves or get down on ourselves and so on. And what I'm encouraging is to say, listen, just for a minute, let's stop worrying so much about our current position and focus a little bit more on our current trajectory. Am I getting 1% better or 1% worse? Is the arrow pointed up and to the right, or have we flatlined? Because if you're on a good trajectory, if you're on a good path, all you need is time. But if you're on a bad trajectory, even if you're in kind of a strong position right now, it's not going to end well. And so habits are a double-edged sword. They can either build you up or they can cut you down. It's like we're all just kind of following our normal routine, right? We're doing our typical thing, and then 3 years from now, it's like, knock, knock, who's there? Oh, the consequences of my past decisions. Turns out that creeps up on you. And I think we all have felt this, we all know this just from going through life, but I feel like this is a good reason for why you want to understand what a habit is and how it works, so that you can be the architect of your habits and not the victim of them, right? So that you can design them to benefit you, not to hinder you. All right, now you could say, okay, 1% changes can add up, continuous improvement can make a difference, that you make these small changes and they can lead you to a better direction. You could buy into all that, but then you could say, well, if this is so powerful, it's relatively easy to do on any given day and it can kind of transform your life, why don't more people do it? Why don't people make these changes? Why does behavior change so hard? We have all these narratives that we tell, these stories that we tell about how hard it is to change your habits and behavior, how difficult it is to improve, and so on. And one of the common stories that we tell is something like, well, maybe if you really wanted it, then you would do it. Maybe the problem is discipline, or you don't have enough grit or willpower or persistence. And certainly discipline and grit and willpower are very important qualities in life. But I don't know that answer is quite right. I think many people, certainly most people in this room right now, genuinely do want to improve, genuinely would like to perform at a high level, genuinely would like to fulfill their potential. And so what I would say is, look, if you're struggling to improve, the problem isn't you. The problem is your system. We don't change, not because we don't want to change, but because we have the wrong system for change. And I think we could even go a step further and say, listen, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
That's right.
Yes.
So often in life we're told, hey, you need to be more ambitious. You should 10x your vision, think bigger, set a bigger goal for yourself. But setting the goal is kind of the easy part. I'm an author, right? So I could set a goal to sell 100 million books. It took 3 seconds. The goal is not the hard part, right? It's building a system of behaviors, a collection of habits that carry you almost inevitably toward that outcome.
Yeah.
And if we were to rewind just a couple minutes, think about the British cycling team again, presumably every Olympian at the Olympic Games has the goal of winning the gold medal. The goal is not the thing that determines the outcome, right? It's genetic ability, coaching and strategy for the event, levels of training and persistence, how much sleep they got the night before, like all kinds of things. Or if you have a job opening and 100 people apply for the job, presumably every candidate has the goal of getting the job. The goal is not the thing that determines the outcome. Again, it's many things. Who they know with the company, networking, education experience, presentation skills in the interview, and so on. And so if I was going to put a finer point on the language, what do I mean when I say goal and system? Your goal is your desired outcome. It's the target, the thing you're shooting for. What is your system? It's the collection of daily habits that you follow. And if there is ever a gap between your goal and your system, if there is ever a gap between your desired outcome and your daily habits will always win.
Yeah.
Right? Almost by definition, your current habits are perfectly designed to deliver your current results. So whatever system you've been running, whatever collection of habits you've been following for say the last 6 months or year or 2 years, it's carried you almost inevitably to the outcomes that you have right now. Now, this doesn't mean that habits are the only thing that matter in life, right? There is luck and randomness, there's misfortune, but by definition, luck and randomness are not under your control, and your habits are. And the only reasonable, rational approach in life is to focus on the pieces of the situation that are within your control. So, I'm setting this up kind of like a dichotomy, right? We have goals and we have systems, but what we really want is both. We want an alignment between your desired outcome, your goal, and your daily habits, your system. And where I've kind of come down on this after thinking about it for a few years after publishing the book is that goals can be helpful, right? They can be good for setting a sense of direction and clarity, so you know where you're going to row the boat to. They can be good for filtering. Somebody comes to you with an opportunity and says, hey, do you want to do this? You can run it through that filter and say, well, it doesn't really help me get closer to my goal, so I'm going to say no. But for the most part, once the goal has been selected, you should kind of set it on the shelf and spend most of your time focused on the system. Goals are good for people who care about winning once. Systems are best for people who care about winning repeatedly. If you really want to make progress, you need some kind of system to keep you up there, right? You need some kind of process to drive you forward. All right, now it's up to you all to decide what your goals are, what you're trying to optimize for. But I can help with the habits part. I can help with the system part. So let's talk about that. How do we change a habit, right? How do we adjust the gears of this system that we're running? So I like to break a habit into 4 different stages. And I think if you understand these 4 stages, you not only understand what a habit is and how it works, but you also have, they're kind of like levers that you can pull. You got like 4 different places where you can intervene. And when the levers are in the right positions, building good habits is easier. And when the levers are in the wrong positions, building habits is harder. So I'll give you the high level view and then some examples, all right? So from a high level, all habits go through these 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. Cue, craving, response, reward. The cue is a trigger that tells your brain to initiate the habit. So it's just something that gets your attention. Maybe you're driving down the road and you hear a siren. It's an ambulance that comes up from behind you. That's an auditory cue that starts the habit of pointing to the side of the road. Or your phone buzzes in your pocket. That's a physical cue that starts the habit of checking your phone. Or you see a plate of cookies on the counter in the kitchen. That's a visual cue that starts the habit of eating a cookie. Right? So something that you notice. The cue kickstarts the process. The next step is the craving. Your brain makes a prediction about what that cue means. So you see the plate of cookies on the counter, visual cue. Your brain predicts, oh, that'll be sweet, sugary, tasty, enjoyable. And that's what gives you the desire, the motivation, the craving, to walk over, pick it up, and take a bite. So that's the response, the actual habit that you perform. And then finally, there's a reward. Oh, it is in fact sweet, sugary, tasty, enjoyable. Now, not every behavior in life is rewarding, right? So if we focus on this 4th stage for just a minute, sometimes things have a cost or a consequence. Sometimes they're just kind of neutral and they don't really mean a whole lot. But if a behavior is not rewarding, if it doesn't benefit you in some way, if it doesn't feel good or positive in some way, it's hard for it to become a habit. Because your brain needs some reason to mark the experience. To say, hey, remember what you just did? That felt good, that got you something beneficial, so let's repeat that again in the future. So the reward is kind of like closing the feedback loop and teaching your brain, helping train your brain what to repeat in the future. All right, there's a lot more to discuss about the science of habits, but I'm gonna save that for the book, right? Like I kind of unpack that fully in Atomic Habits. If you're really interested in the science, it is there. What I care most about though, and what I wanna focus on today, is how do we operationalize this? How do we take the scientific backbone for how habits work and then translate that into something that I can apply in daily life and work? And so I've come up with what I call the 4 laws of behavior change. There's one for each step. So the first law is to make it obvious. You want the cues of your good habits to be obvious, available, visible, easy to see. Easier it is to see or get your attention, the more likely you are to act on it. The second law is to make it attractive. The more attractive or appealing a habit is, the more motivating or enticing it is, the more fun it feels like it is to you, the more likely you are to feel compelled to do it. The third law is to make it easy. The easier, more convenient, frictionless, simple a habit is, the more likely it is to be performed. And then fourth and finally, make it satisfying. The more satisfying or enjoyable, the more pleasurable or rewarding a habit is, the more likely you are to return to it next time. So make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, you know, I have this habit, I keep procrastinating on it, I just can't quite seem to get myself going, like I want to do it, but I can't get off square one. Or, you know, maybe in a business context, you can be thinking about, you know, we have this behavior, we keep asking people to do this, but they only do it every now and then. You can just run through these questions and ask yourself, how can I make the behavior more obvious? How can I make it more attractive? How can I make it easier? How can I make it more satisfying? And from a high level, you can carry these questions around with you throughout life and apply them to whatever habit you're working on. And it's going to start to call forth different strategies or different things that you could do to increase the odds that the behavior is going to occur. Now, this is the big picture view for building a good habit. Make it obvious, attractive, easy, satisfying. If you want to break a bad habit, then you just invert these 4. So rather than making it obvious, make it invisible. Unsubscribe from emails, don't keep junk food in the house. If you're trying to follow a new diet, don't follow a bunch of food bloggers on Instagram. You know, like reduce exposure to the cue. Rather than making it attractive, make it unattractive. Rather than making it easy, make it difficult, increase friction, add steps between you and the behavior. Rather than making it satisfying, make it unsatisfying. They're on some kind of cost or consequence, especially if it's an immediate cost. So again, for both of these, there are many ways to do each of these things. There are many ways to make habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. There are many ways to make bad habits invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. But from a big picture view, this is what we're trying to do. All right, I want to give you some examples now so you can walk out of here and feel like I know exactly what I could do to apply this. All right, let's talk about the first law, make it obvious. So Massachusetts General Hospital, large teaching hospital in Boston, there's a researcher there named Anne Thorndike, a physician, and she and her colleagues had this interesting question, which is, can we get people to change their behavior without motivating them, without increasing their willpower? In fact, we're not going to talk to them at all. So what the researchers did was they went into the hospital cafeteria. So here's a picture, drawn to scale. We've got these gold shaded boxes. Okay, those are different refrigerators that have Coke, soda, juice, different drink options in them. Then you have the 2 little boxes, the dark squares on the sides of the room. Those are smaller refrigerators that have water. And then all the other shapes are food stations and buffet lines. All right, now what the researchers did was they went in and they added water to the main refrigerators. There's still Coke and soda and juice, but they added water. And then they also added some of those little rolling carts, and they put those around the different food lines, and those had water in them as well. All right, so they just increased the prevalence of water in the environment. What happens 6 months later? 25% more water is sold, 11% less soda. And I always think it's interesting, you know, say you went up to somebody and they're sitting in the cafeteria and you're like, why'd you buy a Coke? I'd be like, what are you talking about? You know, like, this is what I wanted to get. They're like, why'd you get a water? This is what I felt like drinking. But the truth is, some percentage of them chose that option just because of how it was presented to them.
Wow.
And this is one of the most overlooked drivers of your habits and behavior, which is the shape of your physical environment. The things that are on your counter in your kitchen, the way your living room is laid out, the items on your desk in your office, all of these spaces where we live and work each day, they shape the choices that we take. And when the good habit is the path of least resistance, it's much more likely to be followed. And when the bad habit is the path of least resistance, you're a lot more likely to slide into it. I think one thing you can do, just keep one habit in the back of your mind that you're trying to build, and then walk into the rooms where you spend most of your time each day. So your bedroom, your living room, your kitchen, whatever. And look around those spaces and ask yourself, what is this space designed to encourage? What behaviors are obvious here? What behaviors are easy here? And you're gonna start to notice little things that you can do to increase the odds that the habit's going to occur. If you want an example of this, a lot of people feel like they watch too much TV, but walk into any living room. Like, where do all the couches and chairs face? Like, what is this room designed to get you to do? And I'm not saying you need to rearrange your entire house, but you get the idea. If you make a dozen or 2 dozen or 50 little adjustments like this, no individual change is going to radically transform your behavior, but collectively, you start to live in an environment that is promoting and supporting your goals rather than running counter to them. All right, I think you get the point, which is just, if you want a habit to be a big part of your life, make the cue a big part of your environment. I mean, so often people say something is important to them, and then you walk around, you look around where people are spending their time each day, and it's not optimized for the thing that they say they're optimizing for.
That's right.
All right, second law, craving, make it attractive. Let's say you go to bed tonight, and you're like, well, listen to this guy talk about habits today, so tomorrow's gonna be the day. I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna go for a run.
Yeah.
So you set your alarm, say it's like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
6 rolls around, your bed is warm. Press snooze, I can do it tomorrow. But if you come back to today, you text a friend, you say, hey, can we meet at the park at 6:30 and go for a run? Well, now 6 a.m. rolls around, and your bed is still warm, but if you don't get up and go for a run, you're a jerk because you leave your friend at the park all alone. So you have simultaneously made it more attractive to get up and go for a run, and less attractive to press snooze and sleep in. You haven't really made the habit any easier, right? The run is still gonna be just as annoying as it was before. But you have changed the calculus that's going on in your mind about whether you want to do it or not. This is a strategy that scientists would call a commitment device, and there are a bunch of examples of them in Atomic Habits, but a commitment device is good for short-term motivation. It's good for getting you going this week. It helps you overcome that kind of initial friction of getting started. And it's pretty much any time that you make a choice in the present, let me text my friend, that locks in your behavior for the future. Okay, now I'm gonna have to get up tomorrow morning. Commitment devices are good for short-term motivation, for making habits seem attractive initially. If you really want a habit to stick though, if you really want it to last for months, years, sometimes even decades, there's a second element that you need to capture for making habits attractive, and that is the power of the social environment. So many of our habits are socially reinforced. That's really the thing that gets them to stick. And it's such a pervasive element that drives our habit formation that we almost don't even think about it anymore. Like, I could be wearing a bathing suit right now, but that would be weird, right? It would violate every expectation we have about what you're supposed to do when you give a presentation like this and how you act in a room full of people and so on, right? And so I chose what I wore today, but only sort of, right? The menu of options was already pretty restricted based on the group that we all knew we were gonna be a part of. And all areas of your life are like that. You're a part of many groups. Some are large, like what it means to be American, or some are small, like what it means to be a neighbor on your street, or a member of the local CrossFit gym, or a volunteer at the elementary school. But all of these groups, large and small, they have a set of shared expectations for how you act and what you do when you're part of that group. And when habits go with the grain of the group, they're pretty attractive to stick to because they signal to the people around you, hey, I get it, I belong, I'm part of it, I understand what we do here. And when you try to make a choice that goes against the grain of the group, habits are kind of unattractive. It's like you're causing friction and tension. And so I think the punchline is you want to join groups, to join tribes, where your desired behavior is the normal behavior.
Woo!
The more that you do that,
right,
the more likely it is that the habit's gonna stick, because at some deep level, humans all want the same thing. We all have this desire to bond and connect. Even if it's just being part of your little family unit, humans are very social creatures. We want love and affection and attention and support. And so if people have to choose between, I have habits that I don't really love, but I fit in, I belong, I'm part of something. Or I have the habits that I want to have, but I'm cast out, I'm ostracized, I'm criticized. I mean, the desire to belong will often overpower the desire to improve. And so as best as possible, you need to get those two things aligned, to join groups where your desired behavior is normal so that you can rise together, build friendships, build connection together, and the people that you're hanging around have the habits that you want to have. And it all just becomes so much easier and downstream from that. All right, we talked about physical environment, talked about social environment. Punchline is kind of similar. Like, I've never seen somebody consistently stick to positive habits in a negative environment. I mean, maybe you can do it for a day or a week or I don't know, a month or two, but like at some point, the environment is almost like a form of gravity. It's kind of like constantly pulling you back. And so every physical room that you're in has a set of behaviors that are easy and frictionless and, you know, more natural. And you're always kind of being pulled to do those things. Every group that you belong to has a set of expectations for how you act and social norms that kind of guide the behavior of the group. And you're always kind of being pulled toward doing those things. And so you want to get your physical environment, your social environment, and even your digital environment optimized for the habits you're trying to build. All right, third law, make it easy. This picture of Twyla Tharp. She's a famous dance choreographer and instructor. She's worked on Broadway for many years, won a MacArthur Genius Grant. She's, you know, toured to the whole world doing her different choreography and work. And she's also a big fan of habits. And so she has a quote, I'm gonna read it to you and then we're gonna unpack it a little bit, right? So here's what she says. I begin each day of my life with a ritual. I wake up at 5:30 a.m., put on my workout clothes, my leg warmers, my sweatshirts, and my hat, walk outside my Manhattan home, hail a taxi, and tell the driver to take me to the Pumping Iron Gym at 91st Street and 1st Avenue, where I work out for 2 hours. The ritual is not the stretching and weight training I put my body through each morning at the gym. The ritual is the cab. The ritual is the cab. The moment I tell the driver where to go, I have completed the ritual. It's a simple act, but doing it the same way each morning habitualizes it, makes it repeatable, easy to do. It reduces the chance that I would skip it or do it differently. It is one more item in my arsenal of routines and one less thing to think about. All right, so let's step back for a second. You know, if you were to ask an academic or a researcher or a journalist what a habit is or to describe habits to you, they're going to tell you that habits are these, you know, short, mindless, automatic behaviors. Brushing your teeth, tying your shoes. Every time you pick up a pair of barbecue tongs, got to tap them together twice. Like, you know, stuff that you don't even think about, right? Obviously, I'm not the only one. But if I were to go to you and I said, hey, tell me about a couple habits that you're trying to build. You're probably not going to pick stuff like that, right? You're going to say, I'm trying to go to the gym 4 days a week, or I'm trying to write every day, or, you know, something like that. And I know what you mean when you say that, you know, like you're trying to make it this regular practice. But writing, for example, pretty effortful. You're thinking, you know, is this the right word? Should I cut that sentence or rearrange these paragraphs? It's not mindless the way that brushing your teeth might be. And I would wager that most of the habits that we really care about in life, like when people pick up Atomic Habits and they read it, what's in their mind that they're thinking they'd like to change? It's probably one of these effortful behaviors. It's probably one of these things that we feel like is really going to move the needle in our life and work. And so how do we bridge this gap? On the one hand, research is telling us habits are mindless and automatic. They're these quick things that we don't even think about. And on the other hand, every person walking around in the world is saying, well, the habits that I want to build are kind of effortful and require some thought and concentration. And I think Twyla Tharp provides the answer. The answer is you focus on the cab, not the gym. You focus on the entry point to the habit that's really going to pay off for you, and you let that drive you forward. You use that momentum as an on-ramp to the thing that really matters. So let me give you an example. The thing that really moves the needle in my business is writing the next piece of content. So maybe I'm writing a newsletter or a chapter of a book, but I'm sitting down and I'm writing. Each morning there's this moment that kind of shapes how my day is going to go. All right, so I sit down, let's say I go to my office like 9 a.m. and one of two things happens. Either I open up Google Docs and I start writing the next article I'm going to work on, or I go to ESPN and I check the latest sports news. And what happens in the first hour is really shaped by what happens in the first 45 seconds. Because if I go to ESPN, that hour's pretty much shot. But if I start writing, even if it's just a sentence or two, then I'm into the work and you kind of get going, right? And it's like pulling me forward. Similar sort of thing. So before the pandemic, my wife and I worked out at the same gym, and we're still together. I realized I phrased that strangely. We have a home gym now. Anyway, we used to go to this gym, and she would get off work and come home and say it's like 5:30 or 6, and one of two things would happen. Either we would change into our workout clothes and get in the car and drive to the gym, or we'd sit on the couch and watch The Office and order Indian food. And both of those are good nights, but they're very different nights. And the whole thing that changes it is, do we change into our workout clothes or not? If we change clothes, the next hour is like already done. We'll get in the car, we'll go to the gym, we'll do the squats, like it's already over at that point. And so I think the question to ask yourself is twofold. One, when I'm living a good day, when I'm really on, when things are clicking for me, when I feel like, yeah, I'm really showing up and doing the things I want to do, what are the 2 or 3 things that tend to be part of that day? Like I know for me, if I get my workout in, that kind of pulls the whole rest of the day in line. So that's kind of one of those pillar things for me. And then 2, what is the cab and not the gym for that behavior? What is the equivalent of changing into your workout clothes or opening up that Google Doc and writing the first sentence? And can you just find the smallest possible entry point to that habit that's really gonna pay off? And you try to make that entry point, that first minute, as automatic as possible. And then you let the momentum carry you forward. All right, so I'll give you a really practical way to do this. I call it the 2-minute rule. All right, 2-minute rule is very simple. I'll say, I hope you find the whole presentation interesting and useful, but if you can only remember one thing today, the 2-minute rule is a good pick, right? And I say that because it can be applied to pretty much any habit that you're trying to build. So it's very simple. It just says, take whatever habit that you're trying to create and you scale it down to something that takes 2 minutes or less to do. So read 30 books a year becomes read 1 page. Do yoga 4 days a week becomes take out my yoga mat. And sometimes when I mention this, people resist it a little bit. They're like, okay, buddy, like, the real goal isn't just to take my yoga mat out. I'm not actually trying to do the workout. So this is some kind of mental trick, and I know it's a trick. Why would I fall for it, basically? And, I understand where people are coming from, but I had this reader, his name's Midge. I mentioned him in Atomic Habits. He lost over 100 pounds, kept it off for more than a decade now. Woo! And when he first started going to the gym, he had this strange little rule for himself where he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. So he'd get in the car, drive to the gym, get out, do half an exercise, get back in the car, drive home. And it sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds silly. You're kind of like, obviously this is not going to get the guy the results that he wants.
Repetition.
But if you take a step back, what you realize is he was mastering the art of showing up.
Yeah.
He was becoming the type of person that went to the gym 4 days a week, even if it was only for 5 minutes. And this is a deep truth about habits, something people often overlook, which is a habit must be established before it can be improved.
Dang.
Right? It has to become the standard in your life before you can scale it up and optimize it into something more. You need to standardize before you optimize. And I don't know why we do this, but we get very all or nothing about our habits a lot of the time. We're so focused on finding the best workout program, the perfect diet plan, the ideal sales strategy. We're so focused on optimizing that we don't give ourselves permission to show up, even if it's just in a small way. But if you can't master the art of going to the gym for 5 minutes 4 days a week, like who cares how good the 45-minute workout plan is?
Yep.
It's just a theory at that
That's
point.
good.
I'm reminded of that quote from Ed Lattimore where he says, the heaviest weight at the gym is the front door.
Yes.
Woo!
There are a lot of things in life that are like that. The heaviest step is the first one, the hardest action is the first movement. And so if you can scale it down and use something like the 2-minute rule to master the art of showing up, well, now you can gain a foothold and you can kind of advance to the next level from there. Once you're in the arena, there are endless opportunities to optimize. But if you're just sitting on the sidelines theorizing about what the best way to do it would be, well, now you're not getting any results. All right, 4th law, make it satisfying. I'm sure many of you have heard about habit trackers before. This is a picture of a habit tracker. This is, in addition to Atomic Habits, I have a habit journal. This is the template in the back. But anytime you do your habit, you put a little X down. You kind of, build up a streak of X's, and it's a way of getting some feedback. Putting down an X on a piece of paper is a small thing, but why do I bring it up now? I bring it up because it's a good example of a larger principle that's very important for habit formation, which is how do you visualize your progress? One of the hardest things about building habits is that you show up and you do the right thing, and then you have nothing to show for it. So my parents, for example, they like to swim. And if they were making it about the physical results, their body looks exactly the same when they get out of the water as it did when they jumped in. So they have no evidence that that workout was worth it. It takes too long. They gotta wait a year or 2 or 3 years before they can really see the progress there. But they use a little tracker like this, and they put an X down, and then they count up how many workouts they did throughout the month and compare that to the month before. And it's a way of getting some feedback while they're on the path, waiting for those longer term rewards to accumulate. Or at work, maybe you can like get together as a group and be like, man, we've been meeting every week trying to ship this project or ship this feature or complete this launch, and it still hasn't happened 6 months later. Well, you can use a little habit tracker and visualize your progress somehow. And in the beginning, you don't have a whole lot to show for it, but at some point you start to get a little streak going, 3, 4, 5, 6 days in a row. And at that point, a little mantra to keep in mind, I think, is don't break the chain. It doesn't matter how good or how bad that particular day was. It doesn't matter if that got you the result that you wanted. Just don't break the chain. Keep the streak alive. Now, of course, at some point, you have to travel for work, or your kids get sick, or you need to do something for your parents, or whatever it is. Some emergency of life weasels its way in and breaks the streak. And that's actually a very critical moment, because every streak is going to break at some point. And some people use that as a reason to get down on themselves or feel like, oh, see, I knew, why did I even bother, right? Like, this always happens. Other people use that as a way to restart, to kickstart. And what you find is that people who are at the top of their game, almost whatever field in life, they make mistakes like everybody else. Nobody is perfect, but they tend to be good about reclaiming their habits quickly.
Yes.
And if the reclaiming of a habit is fast, the breaking of it doesn't matter that much. You get to the end of the year and it's just kind of a little blip on the radar.
Yep.
And so the other mantra that I like to keep in mind is not only don't break the chain, but never miss twice.
Yes.
Maybe I've been sticking to something new for 7 or 8 or 9 days, and then it breaks on the 10th day. Well, I wish that hadn't happened, but let me get back on day 11. Or in my case, the habit that kind of launched my career was I wrote a new article every Monday and Thursday, and I did that for 3 years. Well, if I missed on Monday, I wish that hadn't happened, but let me pour all my energy into getting an article out on Thursday and getting back on track quickly. All right, so quick recap: cue, craving, response, reward. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. This is a very, very practical framework. I think you can apply it to almost any habit in your life, but it's not the secret of this talk. The secret of this talk is that it's not actually about little habits, it's about believing something new about yourself. And this is a concept that I refer to in the book as identity-based habits. And the real idea is that true behavior change is actually identity change. It's getting you to shift the story that you have about who you are and what's normal for you, about why you act the way you do and what's a typical day look like. And so this is why I say, the real goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to do some silent meditation retreats, to become a meditator. And in these examples, I'm using labels, reader and runner and meditator and so on, but it's true for characteristics as well, right? Like, I'm the type of person who finishes what they start, or I'm the type of person who shows up on time. And individually, these behaviors don't matter that much, but collectively you start to reinforce something much greater, something much more meaningful. And I think this is the real reason, the true reason that habits matter. People often talk about habits as mattering because of the external results that they will get you. Hey, habits will help you lose weight or make more money or be more productive or reduce stress. And look, it's true, habits can help you do all that stuff, and that's great. But the real reason that habits matter is that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Dang. Woo!
So,
Good.
no, doing one push-up does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts.
Yeah.
And no, writing one sentence does not finish the novel, but it does cast a vote for I'm a writer.
Yeah.
No, giving one bit of positive feedback to somebody on your team does not make you the world's best leader, but it does cast a vote for I'm the type of leader who cares about their teammates. And individually, these are small actions, but collectively you keep casting votes on the pile and you build up this body of evidence for the type of person that you are, for the identity that you have. And you start to have every reason in the world to believe it. This is a little bit different than what you often hear. You often hear people say something like, fake it till you make it. And I don't necessarily have anything wrong with fake it till you make it. It's asking you to believe something positive about yourself. But it's asking you to believe something positive without having evidence for it. And we have a word for beliefs that don't have evidence. We call that delusion. Right? Your brain doesn't like this mismatch between what you say you are and what you're actually doing. And so my encouragement, my suggestion is to let the behavior lead the way. To start with one push-up or one sales call or one email or 1 minute of meditation or whatever it is, and to let that be evidence in that moment that you were that kind of person. And what we're ultimately hoping to get to is this moment where you take pride in being that type of person. You know, if you take pride in your habits, you'll fight to maintain them, right? If you take pride in the size of your biceps, you never skip arm day at the gym. If you take pride in how your hair looks, you have this long hair care routine, you do it every day. I wouldn't know, but you get the idea. Like, the habits that are part of our story, that are part of our identity, are the ones that we have the best chance of maintaining. And so it's important to not only think about the results that you want from your habits, which the world is very results oriented, so there's certainly nothing wrong with that, but to draw a through line from those results to your deeper identity and values, so that you can see how showing up in that small way is actually about much more than just getting a result. It's about being that type of person. All right, I won't bore you with the stats on the book. It's done incredibly well. All I want to mention is that it's there for you as a resource. You know, if you find yourself sitting there and thinking, what else can I do to make habits obvious? How else can I make habits easy? Like, the book covers all that in much greater detail. And so what I'd like to do now is welcome Dr. A on the stage, and we can take a few questions. And as we do that,
Amazing talk.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. I can't hear it enough.
I'll kick things off by giving you all one question that you can take with you and think about, which is, how can you get 1% better today? So thank you. Looking forward to the Q&A.
Awesome. So James, you know, one of the key things, and first of all, it's so cool to be here with a fellow champion for habits and habit formation, because it makes all the difference, right?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to hang out with people who are implementing the ideas. You know, like, that's the best part of it, is using it in the real world.
Exactly. So our industry right now is in rapid change, you know, with the onset of the GLP-1 drugs, and we've been helping people get healthy for a long time.
Sure.
But basically, what advice would you do to help people embrace this change?
Well, you know, the process of behavior change almost always starts with self-awareness. And so it's really, you know, there's this common myth that it's hard to change behavior or whatever. Your brain is always changing your behavior. Every room you're in, I mean, I'm changing my behavior because I'm talking to you right now. You know, like, you're always adapting to the environment that you're in. And that's one of the core jobs of your brain. What is difficult, however, is to design your behavior, to shape it in the way that you want, and not just be reactive and reacting to the world around you. And I think designing your behavior often starts with self-awareness. And so when you're dealing with any situation where there's a lot of change, whether it's an industry that is changing rapidly, or whether it's a personal change that's coming into your life because of some inflection point, becoming more self-aware is a good starting point for kind of getting your feet under you and then determining what change you want to make from there. There are a couple different exercises I recommend in the book. I mean, one of them is called the Habit Scorecard. It's very simple. You just start at the beginning of your day and you write down all the habits that you're already doing. So I wake up, I turn off my phone, I go to the bathroom, I take a shower, I brush my teeth, I make breakfast. Like, you can go through your whole day. And then you start to evaluate, is this a positive habit that's serving me? Is this a negative habit that I feel like is holding me back? Or is it just kind of neutral and it doesn't matter that much? And you often don't even need to do more than that. Just becoming aware of your habits and not blindly doing them is sometimes enough to change it. There are a variety of studies that show that if people just track what they eat each day, they're not even trying to follow a diet or hit a certain calorie number. They're just being aware of what is going into their body. That alone will change their eating habits. So if you want to apply it to an industry or to the work that you all are doing, I always think, like, where are your inputs coming from? Are you aware of that? You know, so basically, rather than your food diet, it is your information diet. You know, almost every thought that you have is downstream from what you consume. We don't usually think about it with that gravity, but when you choose who to follow on Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you're choosing your future thoughts in a sense, because that's what's filling up your feed over the next week or month. When you choose what podcast to listen to or what book to read, you're choosing your future thoughts. And so if you want better, more creative, more productive thoughts, you need better, more creative, more productive inputs. I think that's true not only for your physical body, but also for your mental well-being as well. So I think one of the best ways to deal with change is becoming aware of what you're currently doing, and that will give you a much better starting point for determining where to go next.
I love that. You know, increasing your consciousness is so critical. So the second question is, when your approach to a goal stops working, how do you evaluate your habits?
It's a good question. You know, I talk a lot about systems, right? A lot about process and trying to focus on the system. But you still need some kind of direction. I mean, how do we know if a system is working? Well, it needs to be moving you forward in some way. So forward toward what, right? Like, and I think that's what I'm going to encourage you all is to ask yourself a couple questions. You know, I just sat up here and I gave advice for a while, right? But I actually think questions are more powerful than advice. So one of the first questions to ask is, what am I optimizing for? You know, different people optimize for different things, and you may optimize for different things at different times in your life. Like, I know that I want different things now than I did 10 years ago. And so it's a question that we need to continue revisiting. But if you're trying to figure out if your habits are working for you, well, the first thing you need to know is, what am I optimizing for to begin with? So what am I optimizing for? That's the first question. Second question is, can my current habits carry me to my desired future? So once you know what you're optimizing for, are you on a path where your habits will get you there? If so, then maybe what you need is patience. But if not, then something needs to change. I think the third one that I like to ask sometimes is, if an alien was going to come down and follow you around, right? So just do this hypothetical thing. They come down from outer space, they're going to walk around with you each day. They can't speak your language, they don't understand anything that you're saying. They can only see your actions and not hear your words. What would they say your priorities are? And you know, a lot of the time, this is particularly a challenge with smart people. Smart people can come up with a good reason for not doing anything.
Come on.
And so they're very good at justifying why things aren't happening.
Yep.
And if nobody can hear your story, if nobody can hear your words, what would they say your priorities are? And at some point, it doesn't mean that, you know, like, there's stuff that all of us face in life. There are all kinds of obstacles, challenges, and barriers. There are hard times and good times for each of us. So it doesn't mean that the excuses like don't exist, but at some point you have to figure out a way to work around them and to make things work for you. And so I think those three questions: what am I optimizing for? Can my current habits carry me to my desired future? And what would an alien that follows me around say my priorities are? Those kind of help, you know, triangulate what you should be focusing on.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. So what advice would you give someone that's trying to move and struggling with changing from that entrenched thinking into that fixed mindset to a growth mindset?
I had a high school basketball coach once who told me confidence is just displayed ability. And so what he meant was, hey, listen, if you're not feeling confident about your ability to make a free throw, like, go out there and practice for an hour, and once you knock 10 down in a row, you're gonna feel a lot better about it. And so translating that to this situation, you find yourself feeling entrenched, you find yourself feeling like you're running against this growth mindset, you're kind of fixated on your limitations. Let's try to find some small wins. You know, find something that you can start to grab onto and see a little bit of momentum. You need to do whatever the equivalent of making 10 free throws is. And scale it down, make it really small and easy to do, but try to find some way to give yourself a little bit of momentum. It's really hard to ignore proof that you have in your life. And I think that's one of the things I was trying to get at with the identity-based habits piece at the end of this talk. And the real value of scaling habits down and making them easy to do is that they provide you with some real proof that something is going forward for you, that something is working. And once you have evidence that things are working, it becomes a lot easier to believe that maybe something else can work, that maybe you can continue to grow. Don't dismiss how much you can do with 5 good minutes. You know, like 5 good minutes of exercise can reset your mood for the day. 5 good minutes of conversation can restore a strained relationship. 5 good minutes of writing can make you feel like the manuscript's moving forward again. Like, just 5 good minutes can really reset things for you and make you feel like, okay, now maybe things are moving in the right direction for me. And so it doesn't have to be much, but I would scale it down and try to find some way to give yourself a little bit of evidence that growth is possible.
Awesome, James. Hey, thank you so much for pouring into it.
Thank you.
James Clear!